Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to a new season of Adventures in Compliance. In this season, we are going to review the short stories which appeared in the Strand Magazine from July 1891 to June 1892 and were collected in the book The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Over the next 12 episodes, I will be reviewing each story and mine them for leadership, compliance, and ethical lessons. In this episode, we take up The Adventure of the Man with the Twisted Lip, which appeared in the Strand Magazine in December 1891. We consider the compliance lessons from this fascinating story. I know you will enjoy this episode of Adventures in Compliance. This episode begins in an opium den where Watson is trying to help a friend's wife, a Mrs. St. Clair, who believes she has seen her husband in the opium den. While in the opium den, it turns out that Sherlock Holmes is there, also under an investigation. After seeing her husband in the opium den, Mrs. St. Clair goes into it, the room she saw him, and finds only two people, one of whom is known as Hugh Boone. Boone was found with her husband's clothes, and then he is arrested, and he denies any knowledge of Mr. St. Clair. He also resisted any attempts to make him wash. Holmes was initially quite convinced that St. Clair had been murdered and that somehow Boone was involved. Then he investigates the opium den in disguise, and when he returns to the St. Clair home, he is surprised as several days later, Mrs. St. Clair received a letter from her husband in his own handwriting with his wedding ring enclosed, telling her not to worry. This forces Holmes to reconsider his conclusions, eventually leading him to an extraordinary solution. They go to the jail where Boone is being held and actually sponge bath Boone, and it turns out that Boone is Neville St. Clair, the missing husband. St. Clair has been living a double life. In his youth, he was an actor, and he found he could make more money begging with a quick wit and a quick word than he could in a more temporal position. This led him to the streets of London every day to lead this double life so that he could support his family in the manner of which they become. So what Boone was really an actor, and he was a street performer performing as a beggar. He was wanted to end this charade, but he didn't know how to do so. His family, he didn't want to shame them or put them in harm's way, but of course there was the potential of the murder of Neville St. Clair over the head of Hugh Boone. Holmes deduces the answer that Boone is St. Clair, and of course that means there's no murder. The police agree not to release this information, but to keep Boone/St. Clair's information secret so as not to embarrass him or his family. And that concludes this most interesting story. This story was the sixth of the original six-story commission given to Conan Doyle by the Strand Magazine. Of course, the commission was extended, and although the story didn't end here and the magazine wanted more, Conan Doyle was not altogether content with the way his career was panning out. Really, no matter that Sherlock Holmes was firmly established as a literary sensation of the Victorian age, He wanted to do something, quote, more serious, end quote, news reporting, and not these detective stories. So Conan Doyle continued to regard his creation of Sherlock Holmes as a trifle, at least when compared with other ideas which were buzzing around in his head. Novels that he could have been writing, stories he could have dreamed of moving forward upon. All of those were placed to one side, put out of the way by Sherlock Holmes. He did complete one novel, A Tale of Huguenot Prosecutions in 17th century France, and started on another, but this, of course, did not come to pass. Even with the ease of which he reduced the Holmes stories to a formula did not lessen his despair. He estimated that each story took him about a week to complete, from first conception to final polish. He would come up with a problem and then a solution, then design characters and sketch out the tale. With all of these ingredients in place, he would settle down at the desk in his study and turn out 3,000 words or so a day. The money was too good to spurn. Fortunately for the rest of us, he did not spurn it. So what are some of the compliance lessons from The Man with the Twisted Lip? Well, number one, honesty and transparency. The character of Neville St. Clair disguises himself and leads a dual life, which eventually leads to misunderstandings and a temporary downfall. In compliance leadership, being open, transparent, and honest is crucial. CCOs and compliance professionals who hide important facts or issues from their teams can create a mistrust or lack of confidence. Two, understand different perspectives. As a beggar, Neville St. Clair was able to understand a different section of society than he would normally not interact with. A good compliance leader must strive to understand the different perspectives, not only within their team, but of course the broader company they work for and even the external market. This enhances decision-making and ensures that everyone feels valued and listened to. Number three, adaptability. Despite his odd choice, Neville St. Clair displayed a high degree of adaptability by successfully leading a double life. In compliance leadership, circumstances often change rapidly, and the ability to adapt quickly and effectively is vital. Good compliance leaders can handle uncertainty, make necessary adjustments, and guide their teams through changes. Number four, the importance of your brand. Neville St. Clair manipulated his appearance to fit into different roles. While this is not advisable from an ethical perspective, it does underscore the impact of a compliance professional's leadership image on their followers, of course, both within the compliance function and across the organization. Compliance leaders need to be mindful of how their behavior, attitude, and professionalism will influence others. Number five, resilience. Despite the hardships he encountered in his double life, Neville St. Clair demonstrated resilience. Compliance leaders often face challenges and obstacles. The ability to bounce back, remain positive, and continue moving forward is a key leadership trait. And number six, integrity. The absence of integrity in St. Clair's actions highlight the importance of this trait in leadership. Leaders must maintain ethical standards and act in a way that is consistent with their words. I hope you will join us next week where we take up the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Adventures in Compliance. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever great podcasts are listened to. If you are a lover of Sherlock Holmes and would like to come on an upcoming podcast and talk about your favorite short story with me, I'd love to have you. As you could probably tell, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I find a lot of compliance lessons learned in the Sherlock Holmes oeuvre. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.